What's up, everyone? It is April here in Wisconsin, and we are slowly approaching our start of our season right now. We've had some questions on, hey, when do we do this? When do we do that? What order do we do the stuff in? And I just thought, well, let's make a video. So we're going to go over two different scenarios for a lawn for this season and what those needs are and how to do that in a chronological order. So first part we're going to get started with is you've got an established lawn, doesn't really need anything constructually, it just needs to be maintained. So we're up top here. This is our makeshift little timeline, and we're going to get started. So here we are in April. We'll be approaching May. The first thing that we're going to do for our services is we're going to get out and do some thatching. So that's where we have the rakes on the front of our mowers. You might have just a hand rake. Either way, you're just doing a light raking to get the dead grass from last year that didn't decompose yet up and out of the lawn, so that the lawn can get the water it needs, it can get the fertilizer, and the other nutrients that it needs. If you have too thick of that thatch layer, you will basically, choke it out and deprive it of those nutrients that it needs. So we're going to get started with thatching. If you are going to aerate in the spring, do the aeration after the thatching. If you try to aerate before you thatch, it will be a mess. And that's the only reason I wouldn't aerate before I thatch, is because if you try to pull all those cores out, muddy cores, and then thatch, it's going to be a disaster. So we're going to thatch, and then we're going to aerate. After that, the third step for an established lawn is going to be putting our pre-emergent down for crabgrass and weeds. Now, again, pay very close attention to the order we have here, because if you put your pre-emergent down before aeration or before thatching, you are wasting your money. Why? Well, the pre-emergent, think about it as it creates or puts down this invisible barrier, this invisible blanket over your lawn. Well, if you put that down over here and then you take the aerator to the lawn and you go and plug a bunch of holes in it, now you have a bunch of holes in that blanket where crabgrass and weed seeds can germinate through. So very important to do that after you're done with the services that are a little bit abrasive to the top layer of soil. Once the pre-emergent is down, that'll go down end of April, early May, and that'll be our first application. Now, what we want to do for the rest of the year here is we want to do our applications 5 to 7 weeks apart. And that is probably the most important part of doing a fertilizer program, whether you're doing it yourself or you're hiring a company, is that there's consistency. If you aren't consistent, you are not going to get the most bang for your buck with the application. So really, for the rest of the year with an established lawn, you're going to get the pre-emergent down, and 5 to 7 weeks later, you're going to do your round 2, which for us would be a broadleaf spray, which is when the dandelions and other weeds are starting to pop up. That allows us to make contact with them and get those babies out of there. 5 to 7 weeks later, we're going to do our third round, where we put down a granular fertilizer and do some spot spraying of any weeds that might have popped through. 5 to 7 weeks after that, another full spray for broadleaves. We're coming out of the hot summer dry months there, where the lawns go dormant and weeds start to poke through because the lawn's dormant. So once the cooler temperatures start to roll in and that grass comes back to life, we are gonna go through and just spray those weeds and continue to keep that clean. 5 to 7 weeks later, before the ground is frozen, hopefully a couple weeks before that happens, we are getting that winterizer down, that round 5. That is a granular application that helps build the strength and the density of the roots as it goes dormant. So as you can see, for an established lawn, pretty simple. Zoom in on here, rewind that, look at that again. Those are the steps and the timelines that you want to follow for that. Now, we will get into the little bit more complex part of this. Let's just say you've got a thin lawn, needs some overseeding. Maybe you have a new lawn that needs to be installed. We'll cover that down here. So again, we're starting here in April, May, and we're looking at a timeline that goes, October 15th through the end of the year when the snow comes, at least in our area. So keep in mind, we're in Northeast Wisconsin, so think of it, anywhere in Minnesota, Iowa, Michigan follows kind of the same, guidelines as this, but, just make sure you understand where you live and if there's any adjustments that you need to make. So here we are. We're going to talk about overseeding and all that. First thing I'm going to do is I'm still going to do some thatching. I want to get all that dead crap out of the way. And it might be a little bit more of a more aggressive thatch or rake if I'm going to do some overseeding, because again, I don't want there to be anything in the way of the seed and the soil. The better the contact we have between those two, the better the results are going to be. Once that thatching is done, you got all the junk out of the way, we are going to aerate it. And we aerate 2 times before we apply the seed. What that does is it agitates that soil and loosens it up, and again, makes the opportunity for a good seed bed, raises the success of that contact. Once that seeding is down, get starter fertilizer on it. The numbers that we use for starter fertilizer are an 18, 12, 6. So you want to find, there's tons of different versions out there, whatever you find. You just want something with a middle number. That is the number that tells you that it's a starter fertilizer, and that's a percentage. So in this case, we know 12% of our bag consists of phosphorus. And again, don't just look for that number bag. There'll be some variations to that depending on where you get it from. So we've thatched it, we've aerated it, we've overseeded it. We got all that done in the April to May time frame. Great time to get it done as soon as that ground is dry, or dry enough and not standing water from the snow. That is prime time. Now you have the rest of the summer. You have a bunch of good season here, from May, June, and early July, where that new grass can get cared for really well by Mother Nature. Mother Nature rains often. The temperatures are still somewhat cool, and it's just a good environment for that grass. So it's good to get it done as early in the year as possible. Now, what we want to do is, if we've done this whole process, we put down that starter fertilizer, that's considered our first application. 5 to 7 weeks later, put down another application of just starter fertilizer. No pre-emergence and no spraying. If you want to spray, do it at the end of the year. If you go and spray a lawn or put a pre-emergent on a newly seeded area, you are going to drastically reduce the success of that seed. So what we're focusing on here is when you do this second app, this third app, this fourth app, just fertilizer, build the turf up. Yeah, weeds are going to pop up in it. Who cares? We can spray that next year. Or like I said, if you've had a good growing year, you could do it later in that August to September timeframe. So that's if we do our overseeding in the springtime. Once that's done, we're just focused on fertilizing it for the rest of the season. Now, let's say you miss that window, or you don't decide to do any overseeding until middle of the summer. Well, that's passed. Is there another option to do? Yep, option number 2. We call this our winter seed time frame. So actually, sorry, there's two more windows there. The first window is August 15th to September 15th. That is a great time to do some seeding. The days are a little bit shorter, they're cooler, Mother Nature is raining. It allows basically the lawn to have more success without you having to spend a ton of extra time taking care of it. So that's a great time to do this same process right here. Literally the same process, put it right here. Once you get from September 15th to October 15th, no, we don't want to do any kind of seeding there. Why? If we do seeding here, you get to the point of the year where we start to have the final warm days and the first frosts that happen. So what can happen is the seed germinates, and then we get a heavy frost that hits. And what that frost will do is wipe out that new seed that you just spent a bunch of time and money installing. So could it work here? Yeah, it could. But if you're trying to set yourself up for success and very little failure, I would say no. I would not do someone's lawn here for hire. If someone asked us, I would say nope. I don't want. It's not worth me wasting your money to do that or our time. So that's not the last time though, or option to do it. If you're still gung-ho on getting that seed down and you missed the first and the second option, October 15th until it snows, golden. Well, okay, Shane, that's like end of the year. The grass isn't going to grow or do anything. It's too cold. Exactly. What you're doing is you're getting that seed. You're going to aerate just like you would, as we talked about back here, and then you're going to put that seed into the ground. It's going to stay there. It's going to freeze into the ground. It's not going to do anything. Perfect. That's okay. It's too cold for it to germinate or have any risk of germinating and then freezing or getting frost. So what you would do is you would get that seed embedded into the ground. Don't put any fertilizer in it at that point. You're just going to waste it. The fertilizer will wash off. Once you get back to springtime, you would follow the same deal here. You obviously won't have to thatch it or do the aerating or overseeding part, but you would put down starter fertilizer and follow that 5 to 7 week timeline, really. So I think I've covered all of that. One thing to consider here is if you're going to do any kind of overseeding from this August 15th to September 15th, you don't want to have any spraying done, I want to say, within 30 days of you anticipating installing that seed. A lot of the common chemicals that are used in the Northeast for controlling weeds will linger for 30 days in the lawn or be active. And if you try to seed, not to say it wouldn't work, but again, you're just lowering your chances of the successfulness. So 30 days before this August 15th mark, if you're going to do some seeding, no herbicides or anything before then. We got a busy season ahead of us. If this doesn't answer a specific question that you had, feel free to comment below or message us. So we'll be glad to touch base on that. But hopefully we've covered enough for you to understand what to do if you have an established lawn this year and what to do if your lawn needs a little bit of work. So thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.